Hey, welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hey, Rob, it's Diana.
Hi, Rob, it's Jackie.
Well, now it looks like everyone's being loud.
I'm always loud.
So loud. You ever get up in the microphone.
Get up in the microphone.
Get your microphone style. It's the only way you can become Twitch Fortnite streamers.
BT dubs, I'm still sick.
Oh, Jackie.
It's been like
Sorry,
forever.
everyone.
Forever.
You're wearing your, smoking jacket
I
today.
know, right? Hi, welcome to 1-800-Behavior Analysis.
1-900.
Yeah, it's not
We
free.
gotta make some money here.
Where you get all your behavior analysis needs.
Hot tips.
Do they have 1-900 numbers anymore?
I don't know.
So,
Because who would call them?
I don't know.
Why would you call that, right? But anyway, this
we
isn't...
have a thing called the internet now.
I know. This isn't a podcast about using the phone to make big money. This is a podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research. Every week, every other week, I suppose, we pick a topic in behavior analysis, we get some research articles, and we do a nice deep dive, sort of like the old school journal club. Yeehaw! Because now we're in the old west, apparently. So this week, we have decided to talk about general case analysis, which is a topic...
General...
What now?
General...
You doing a thing?
Case analysis! Ta-da!
Oh, okay. I got you.
I didn't know where that was going. That's where
I didn't know if you were trying to do like a hello.
Monorail.
Mono.
This was a listener request.
Oh, okay. Because I remember when we started talking about this, I said, I don't know what that is because this seems like old research that's sort of been left by the
I
old
don't know
wayside.
what that is. Well, the request was more generally for generalization, which is a huge topic. So we thought that we would cover generalization by doing a more specific dive into general case analysis.
Gotcha. Okay. So to do that, we had to go back in the old Wayback Machine and find
We
two old articles.
Yeah, we actually found 3.
We found 3 articles. Yeah, sorry.
3.
2 we're going to discuss in more depth, and one sort of is a nice overview of
It's
the
the gravy
concept.
article.
So, Jackie, what is going to be that kind of overview article we're going to start with? And then I'll tell the 2 articles that we're going to be discussing in depth.
Sure. So for all of you behavior analytics students out there, you should have read this study, and if you haven't, you should pick it up. It is An Implicit Technology of Generalization by Stokes and Baer, published in 1977 in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. This should be a printed out copy. It should be folded. It should be underlined. It should be
Folded?
highlighted in different
You have to
special
fold
spots.
it so that it fits in your pillowcase.
Oh.
You can sleep
Yeah.
with it at night.
So this one is a take-homer all. A take-homer all.
This year I've been trying to be good about making sure that I have my stack of articles that is, I want to make sure my supervisees read these articles. So I've been piling on to the old stack.
This is it.
And this
This
one's
is
on
one
Yeah,
of
there.
this
them.
is one for sure.
This is a
Okay.
take-homer
I'm going
all.
to 3-hole punch it and staple it, double-sided, put it in your binder, and then label your binder.
Important articles.
Important articles. And then the 2 articles that we'll be discussing more in depth are the effects of single instance, multiple instance, and general case training on generalized vending machine use by moderately and severely handicapped students by Sprague and Horner from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, 1984. That's old. And using general case instruction to teach spontaneous and generalized requests for assistance to learners with severe disabilities by Chadsey-Rusch, Drasgow, Reinoehl, Halle, and Collet-Klingenberg from the Journal of the Association for Persons with Severe Handicaps, 1993.
Good job on those.
Now, I can think of a great movie that came out in 77, and I can think of a book about 1984, but I can't think of anything in 1993 that came out that was impressive. So, oh well, there goes the trifecta.
I don't know. Under the Table and Dreaming?
By Smashing Pumpkins.
What? That's
No.
Dave Matthews Band. I want to say that's
duh.
94. Maybe it's 93.
Duh.
We'll look it up later. It's not
I'll
really
look it up
important. Not really important to the concept of behavior analysis. So I wanted us to start off with a little bit of a discussion about language and the precision of our language in regards to the term generalization or generality or everyone's favorite word, generalizability.
None of our favorite
It was
words.
94.
Okay. Boom.
And it's
Looks like your knowledge about Dave Matthews does not show enough generalizability.
Stop it, Rob.
Or what about mine, where I was like, smashing pumpkins.
So close.
You might have overgeneralizability.
Okay, I think Rob is trying to prompt me to say that I don't think the generalizability is a useful term.
You explained it very well, because for me, as I am not a doctor, I am very sensitive to my lack of precision, I think, when it comes to describing generality versus generalization. I sort of just use one of those terms. I use them interchangeably, and that is not the way it should be. So I would love it. I'm hoping we have some listeners who would also love it, and it's not just me, to hear when would I use each term in behavior analytic conversation.
Oh, okay. To me, the term generality is the overarching term, right?
The umbrella term.
The umbrella term. And with generality, we most often use it to refer to whether we see external validity related to particular effects, right? So we say that we see the generality of effects when the results from one study could be applied in other scenarios. Like I said, generality could actually refer to lots of different things, right? But we use it more specifically to kind of mean external validity. But generalization is a more specific term.
So you'd use generalization when you're looking at the effects or the durability of behavior across different settings. So a natural effects in the absence of that training. Yeah.
So we most often refer to generalization across conditions or generalization across settings or across stimuli. So behavior that we see under one condition also occurs in a slightly different condition.
Without training.
Without training.
So a lot of times, traditionally, people talked about generalization as being passive, something that you didn't necessarily do. Like, it was just something that happened, you wanted it to happen, and you like probed for it, and if it didn't happen, like, oh, bummer. But we're now looking at it in behavior analysis as more of an active noun. You know, like we can program for generalization.
Oh, okay.
Right?
I feel comfortable thinking about it that way, but the way that I think we were taught was that we saw generalization occur, right? So you train under certain conditions, you test under other conditions, or you program for generalization under other conditions. And you say generalization occurred in the second setting.
Yes.
Versus Johnny generalized.
He can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes you hear that type of term instead, sort of implying activity on the part of the person to engage in generalization versus just seeing the spread of effects to other conditions through the process of reinforcement.
Right. And you see that same process when you're talking about discrimination too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like
good parallel.
Yeah.
So the concern that I have is using those terms, sort of like verbifying generalization into generalizing behavior, and generalizability to me kind of carries that same connotation. So I think it's best to think of generalization as occurring, or to think of seeing the generality of effects across varying conditions versus generalizing in the sense that we're applying that action to an individual.
So if you would like to talk about generalization in behavioral analytic terms, don't make it a gerund form. Don't add that ing at the end of it, because that's imprecise. You would talk about the generality of responses, the generality of the response across environment, across settings, across participants, across adults, or you'd speak about just generalization, but not generalization of response. You just talk about programming for generalization.
Yeah, but it could be a generalization of a response.
Okay,
Right.
as long as you're not making it, as long as you're not making it the verb.
Not making the student do
Little
it.
Johnny generalized.
Okay.
That's imprecise.
So little Johnny's vending machine response was generalized, or you wouldn't use it in that? Would you consider that not even to be an appropriate use of the term?
I would say we saw
Or showed-
You could say you saw responding generalized across a variety of settings,
His vending
or
machine
generalization
usage-
occurred in the context of
Generalization
varying
occurred. Okay.
vending machines.
All right, that sounds good. And generalizability.
I'm not
do
even sure what
like-
that means.
And
We looked it up, and it's a real word, but I don't know how you
Yeah.
would use it
And
behavior
it's been
analytically, and I'm not sure why you would.
it's been in journal articles we've read though, which again left me more confused than when I'd started. But it's not the best term. There are better ways to discuss.
It's the same as generalizing in that I feel like it implies ownership either within the individual or within the stimuli, right? Like something has generalizability which makes me feel uncomfortable because it's not related. It's not living inside the person or inside the stimuli that are part of that. It's part of the process of reinforcement.
Unlike words, which live inside our brains. And
They
come
do.
out when
That's
we call
right.
them.
Yes, you have a homunculus inside your brain, and he is typing out words that you then spit out
Just got to get
of your mouth.
Go in my mind file.
Yep. Anything you're not currently using, he keeps in files for you. Yeah.
We should just do an episode where we just start consistently referring to some sort of failure to understand behavior analysis that drives us insane, and just keep doing it over and over and see who cracks first. Who swears on the microphone gets us our explicit tag.
Generalization is a hard topic. It's
hard.
It's hard to get you think it's easy, and then you start getting into it deeper, and it gets harder.
And you're like, oh.
It feels like one of those challenges you might give to your grad students of like, I want you to talk about generalization with each other for as long as possible, and I'll get the taboo buzzer for whoever uses the term wrong or verbifies it.
Oh, that's punishing. No, I wouldn't want to do that. But we didn't talk about the Johnston 1973 article today, but is it 73 or 79? 79, sorry.
1979.
But that's a really
That's
good
a
one.
Smashing Pumpkin song. Boom.
Thanks, Rob. What year is that?
What year did 1979 come out?
Yeah.
1995.
But anyway, Johnston is a really good article that breaks down the difference between generality and generalization and how we currently use the terms, which we aren't going to go into here because it's a little bit too in-depth, but it's a really good article if you want to know more.
Great. So now we have a better sense of language. Hopefully our listeners do. I
Clear
feel
as
I
mud.
do. So let's get into the idea of the general case analysis, which again, in reading these articles, was a concept I was familiar with, but man, do I not remember. Either I was not asked to read Stokes and Baer, or I forgot to read it, or I just totally forgot the article. They were concepts that were familiar, but it was not...
Full disclosure.
It was, it was not a topic that I said, oh, of course, yes, I remember all of these dimensions. And so while the articles were very easy to read, I think a nice review of Stokes and Baer would be great. So I would love for us to start there.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you the general headings that we can look for.
Cool.
For what we would call as generalization.
Right.
So the first one is what we all do, and we probably shouldn't do, is the good old train and hope.
Yeah.
So the good old train and hope was you train and then hope that generalization has occurred.
Right.
Across untrained settings and people and stimuli and response variations. But we all know that's unlikely to happen, right?
You never know.
But you never know. It's true. Sometimes it happens.
In a pinch, you might be able to do a train and hope, but it's not a good plan.
Right. It's not a good plan. So
It's like the South Park one where you like start with underpants and end up with saving the world.
A, underpants. B, ? C, profit.
No, that's it. It is. It's a little bit like that, right? You're like A, train in the instructional setting. B, ? C, produce the behavior across all settings and stimuli. Ta-da!
that's awesome.
Unlikely to occur.
No.
Right. So Stokes and Baer laid out 9 different methods.
Yep.
Or, they are kind of strategies, right? To promote generalization. But the first one, they say they're at 9, but the first one is total non-starter because it's just train and hope.
Yep.
So.
And the second one is sequential modification. And this one is an active response. So you're actually doing something to hopefully promote generalization.
A
in the
little
future.
bit.
A little. More than train and hope.
Right. So it's do training, check in the generalization setting. And if you didn't get it, train some more in your new setting. Yeah.
So you're sequentially modifying each of the settings if you don't get it. So it's not a prequel of what you're going to think, right? Is that a word?
Prequel is a word. I'm not sure if I understand.
I don't know.
It's not. You're not. You haven't really
you're not
thought
planning
about it.
ahead.
Yeah, you're not planning ahead. There's no prequel for generalization there.
You're reacting to like,
Yes.
generalization has not occurred.
Train
Wait a
and hope
minute,
didn't work.
What if I?
Yeah.
And then you add one more.
Yeah.
And then you try like a third setting or a third set of stimuli and go, still not there. But now I'll try. And you could do this forever.
Yeah.
And eventually over time, you'll have taught your consumer
every single
single response across stimuli for, 1 or 2 responses.
Not helpful though.
And it will take 100 years. So good job.
Yeah.
You did it.
So the third way that they talk about is introduce the response to natural maintaining contingencies.
I love that one, actually.
I do too.
Yeah. I talk about this a lot when I talk about joint attention behavior. Because if you're training joint attention responding, the naturally occurring reinforcer is the social interaction, right? And if you can train that behavior to occur with other types of stimuli, But it's unlikely to generalize and or maintain in the natural setting if you haven't also established social interaction as a reinforcer. And
Absolutely.
this is a perfect example to
Yeah.
me.
So that's one way.
That's all.
Number 4.
Train sufficient examples or exemplars.
I love train sufficient exemplars. I feel that is an easy one that any program that considers themselves an ABA program should just naturally be able to do. Train your staff to always get lots of different exemplars. Even if it's not well trained, just the idea of, hey, how many pictures of apples do you have? You should have like 10 different apples, maybe. Big apples, small apples, dried apples, green apples, red apples, yellow apples.
No, wait, I just want to use one red apple.
The apple example.
The original
What if the
apple.
apple's cut in half?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? There
Right.
you go. Cut in half
Yeah,
apple.
inside of an apple.
Caramel apples.
That's out of bounds.
So as we're talking about that, the next little modification reminds me of that is called train loosely. What's a fruit? Apple. What's a candied fruit? Or show me the deliciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And how I'm modifying the different instructions here so I'm not just asking, pick the apple, over time, but I'm training loosely. I'm giving my SD in varying ways so that the student can respond based on the variation of my SD and not just we pick the.
Yeah, that's like the difference between those two. It's like training loosely is changing how you present the SD or the question, and multiple exemplars is changing what the S plus is going to be in that scenario.
Pick the fall treat that can't be beat. It's a caramel apple.
Oh, God.
Wow.
And then the child is like, can I have a new teacher, please?
That child should appreciate how much fun I'm trying to bring
So
to the
fun.
teaching setting.
Yeah, but you're not just like, show me ready. Touch your
Yeah.
nose.
Oh,
What's your name?
I'm going to
Yeah.
show
Mix
me ready
it up.
one more time.
Mix it up.
Right.
Say something different.
You know what else we could do?
What?
We could also use indiscriminable contingencies.
Yep.
That's another technique that they suggest that we could use.
Right. So vary the reinforcement schedule that you have in place. You never quite know when you're going to get the token or the treat or whatever it might
Or
be.
the
'cause
praise.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more like real life.
Mhm.
Yeah. I wish every time I did something right, like somebody was like, high five, here's $1. You woke up on time. That would be amazing.
Wow, you can make like $360 in a year.
Maybe
Ooh.
365 actually.
Well, you just gotta sleep in occasionally.
Yeah. Well, you'd get up and then
On
you'd have a couple
average.
days you got up and then you stop getting up for a couple days. And then a couple days you get up and you stop getting up for a couple
But if it was indiscriminable contingencies, I'd never know when that
Never know.
person was standing
That's
above
right.
my bed. So I'd always awake.
But you wouldn't know when to wake up.
Right. I'd be like, I'm awake.
Jackie, it's noon. You're supposed to be at work hours ago.
But-
But I didn't know when the money was coming.
That's awesome. The next technique they talk about is programming common stimuli, so looking in the environment where the behavior is most likely to occur and use those types of stimuli.
Mhm.
That, I think, really is the bolded one when you talk about general case analysis. I think
Yeah.
there's other ones
Yeah, yeah.
as well, but I think that one really is one of the cornerstones
Yeah.
of general case
It's
analysis.
a good extension to
Yeah.
training multiple exemplars. Like which exemplars? The ones that are relevant to the individual forever.
It was a great day for me when I figured out that it maybe didn't matter as much that my student couldn't do the pump wall soap in school.
Mhm.
And I asked their family, I was like, well, what kind of soap do you have at home? They're like, we have the normal like pump soap. It's like, let's just do that. Let's just get one of those for school and we'll just do that in both settings. Made a big difference.
And then you're like, ta-da!
I love those
Wow,
bathrooms
that's
that
good.
are clearly like, you know what? You know that universal design I've heard so much about? I went the complete opposite direction and
Yeah.
picked completely, individual design. Nobody can use this garbage. The
Yeah.
sink is way in the back and the soap is up high on a ceiling. And you need to wave your arms in a crazy
Yeah.
direction to make it work.
Yeah, I know. Or by the time you get the water turned on, you can't finish washing your hands
Nope.
before it turns off again, and then you have to keep
It's
touching
great.
it over and over again.
Great design.
Yeah.
I mean, who's the Guggenheim of better universal bathroom design? That's what we need.
Guggenheim's a little bit form over function sometimes.
Oh, okay.
The next one is mediate generalization.
That one's a funny one. So they're saying in your instructional setting, plan to include some specific items that are also going to be present in the generalization setting and have those function as kind of like reminders in the generalization setting on what the tasks are that need to be completed or performed
Yeah, and they said the most commonly used mediator is language.
Fair enough.
And they said, apparently. I love that they had to add that, like, guys.
They didn't think about it before they wrote this article down. Like, it just came to us while we were typing on a typewriter, because this is 77.
I like that. But he also says that even though that's the most common mediator, it sometimes doesn't work. Right, so it couldn't be the only one.
And then coming in at number 9.
Coming in at the end, train to generalize.
So here you can include reinforcement in your generalization setting, which is a little like sequential modification. And saying if generalization occurs, go ahead and reinforce it in order to strengthen it and get additional generalization.
Yeah, I feel like that list is sort of peaks in the middle and it comes back down to like, I guess if that happens, you should probably reinforce
we were shooting for 10, but we got 9.
Yeah, right. Like,
I feel like that one should have been number 4. Like I think train loosely, multiple exemplars. Those feel like, the 6 and 7.
Good,
so it's like, wow, I'm reading this. Because you kind of want to read that list and be like, well, that's pretty good. That's even better. You want to get to the end and say, whoa, this changed my practice, as opposed to kind of ran out of steam at about number 5 there. But no, it's okay.
I completely agree with your mountain analogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to write an article. Response to Stokes and Baer. Guys, reorder the list. Here's the way I'd order it.
Why are they not writing back to me?
Yeah. What journal will that be in? The Journal of Obvious Garbage. Yay. All right. So we have now gone over the 9 components that you want to put into planning for generalization.
Yep. Except really there's only 8.
Really, there's only 8.
And if you reference Johnston 79, he would say that some of those things are not actually generalization.
Right.
They're other components of the environment that are contributing to variant responding.
So they had some fights.
Right, but that's okay because we're not going to get into that here.
Nope, we're not.
That's true.
Right.
Mostly, I think the ones that the articles refer to are the idea of you want to train sufficient exemplars, you want to train loosely, and you want to program for common stimuli. Those are kind of the big 3 that I think the articles we're discussing today really keep coming back to.
Yeah, the middle, the peak.
The middle one, the best ones that are randomly in the middle, as opposed to 7, 8, 9, or
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Well, I guess. Yeah. Do you want to start at 9? I feel like nowadays you want to start at 9.
It's not a listicle, Rob.
Yeah, everything should be written as a list. 9 ways to promote generalization. Number 2 will surprise you.
I didn't even know.
You rewrite this article like that.
I'm going to.
I actually didn't know what a listicle was, and now I know based on your
stupid
feedback.
List.
Well, number 2 always does surprise
They're way
me.
fun.
After the jump.
After the jump. I don't think anyone uses after the jump anymore. That's like so 2014.
Oh, yeah?
Maybe.
What came out that year?
Listicles.
Listicles. Nice. So we wanted to give you guys some background on generalization, and now we're going to talk more specifically about general case analysis.
That's right.
Right?
And we're going to do that right after a quick break. We'll be right back.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu. See you there!
And we are back to talk more about general case analysis.
General
Case
analysis. I should have had the lower one.
So before we do that, though, I know. Before we do that, I had a break, and now we got another break. But hey, really quickly, if
Rob's
you were
stalling.
listening, I'm sorry. I got to read the articles real fast. But if you are interested in applying for continuing education credits for listening to ABA Inside Track, guess what? You can do so. You're going to need some information, though, before you go to our Get CEUs page on the website. And that is 2 secret code words that we hid throughout the episode. The first of those is Ottoman. Ottoman. Ottoman, like the thing you put your feet on, right? Ottoman.
Yep.
They're fun to put your feet on, I think.
Unless they're fabric, and then you've ruined them.
Well, don't put your shoes
Don't
on
wear your shoes
ottoman.
in the house.
With
No.
your dirty feet.
Yuck. Don't do that.
Anyway.
That's a bad idea.
You know, in Beauty and the Beast, that little dog.
Oh, that's
that
an ottoman.
He's a little dog.
He is.
He's so cute.
All right, ottoman. Now that we've had a chance to discuss Stokes and Baer and some of the tenets behind the process of generalization, let's get into our articles. And why don't we start off with vending machine use training. So, Jackie, you're going to take the lead on this one. This was a fun article, I thought. It was pretty straightforward. Sprague and Horner, 1984. It was nice and straightforward, but there's a lot surprisingly in there. Even in 84, vending machines apparently were somewhat complicated.
Well, they're not complicated. They're just varied, right? So
right.
there's
Well,
just-
that makes them complicated.
I guess that's true. Yeah. So vending machines, if you think I think of all the vending machines that I've seen in my life. There's the cigarette vending machines, right? That you put your money in and then you pull the tab and push it over.
Where are you going to find that?
Those still happen places.
I don't know.
No, I don't think they do.
Well,
I'm
you
thinking
don't know.
like the back corner of a decrepit bowling alley.
Sure, but that's where you don't know where these high schoolers are, right?
Probably there.
They're vaping. They're not buying cigarettes.
It's true, but that's one of the vending machines.
Well, it
right?
definitely in 1984.
That's very
Those were
Yes, that
still
would have been
around.
available, and you might have been allowed to use cigarettes as reinforcers in 1984.
no, maybe.
Maybe.
But anyway, there's also when you're using a vending machine, you have to think about, okay, do you put your money in first? Most of the time, yes. Where the
You do get your item first.
you have to think
Most of the
about
time,
are
no.
the letters
Like the battleship kind of A6 sort of
Are they-
punching
Yep.
the code.
but are the letters vertical or horizontal?
Sure.
Are the letters above the numbers or are they below the numbers? Or are they by side
Yeah.
numbers?
Are they just the picture ones where you just punch the giant button?
Right. Yeah, so there's
For a Fanta.
all the different ways that you could use a vending machine. And Sprague and Horner really make a great point that just teaching a single instance of a skill may not necessarily help a participant that we have access functional reinforcers in the community. So they suggest that responses that are functional in the community typically occur across both trained and untrained stimulus conditions. In order for us to more accurately program, we should systematically vary the range of stimulus and responses in a class of stimulus situations where responding is desired. And they call this what I love, the instructional universe.
Love it.
I feel like instructional universe is a better term than sort of let's talk about the variations in response and stimulus that we'll see. No one's going to understand. But if you say we need to practice in the instructional universe, there's
love
something
it.
about that. I think
love it, right?
Your client and consumer will understand. Parents, families will understand. Other non-behavior analysts will understand.
Yeah.
Oh, the idea that there's all sorts of things out there and ways to do the same general, series of responses. Oh, that makes sense.
Right.
It also does really point to just how large a task it can be.
Oh, yeah. So by no means do I want to suggest that general case analysis is simple for the instructor.
No.
It is not.
No,
right?
the concept
Talk
is
about
simple.
preloading.
The practice
Yeah.
is,
Yes.
So we'll talk a lot about that and how they programmed this and then how you might program it. But yeah, so they're looking at the instructional universe. So everything that the participant could come in contact with when respond, and specifically looking at the different stimulus conditions that will be in place and the responses that are going to be required to engage appropriately with those stimulus conditions. So that could be a lot.
Yep.
Right? And so what Sprague and Horner wanted to do, or Sprague and Horner, however you want to say it, I think it's Sprague, but I'm not sure.
I say Sprague.
I do too. I think they wanted to look at, okay, so there is this general case analysis. Is there a relationship between using these guidelines and teaching a specific response? Is it better or more efficient than using just a single instance of that response or a multiple instance of that response? Yeah.
So the general case analysis itself is really all the pre-work.
Oh, yeah.
Because I always thought of it as like that's the teaching side, but it's really not.
No.
It's the breakdown.
It's the breakdown
of the instructional universe to
Yeah.
figure out what are all the pertinent and relevant stimuli that we need to account for and all the pertinent and relevant responses that we need to account
Right.
for in order to properly teach for generalization to the entire world.
The 5 general case analysis guidelines that they have is that you want to define the responses required for your skill, and in this case it would be vending machine performance, right?
Mhm.
So the responses that they required was to know where the vending machine was, to use a little card that they had to identify what the item they wanted,
Mhm.
to get the quarters out and put them on the little card. That's number 4.
Yeah.
But
There's a matching say. They
there's a
were
matching little
learning
thing.
money skills. So
Yep.
just matching quarters.
Matching quarters, putting the quarters in the correct spot, getting their item, and then checking for change. So
Nice.
generally, those are the responses that they're looking for.
And it sounds simple because, oh yeah, that's just how you do a vending machine. But that's for, individuals who have just used a number of vending machines.
Right.
We've been able to engage in that response across a variety of vending machines.
Right. So then the second guideline that you have to think about in this preloading is to define the stimuli that control each response.
Yes.
So this is going to be the hard part. This is where you're going to have a lot of variation in order to make those responses occur, right? So you have to think about where the price is going to be, where the coins are, where the numbers are. So you're going to have to think about all of those variations.
Right.
In this instance,
Yeah.
vending machines
What do
that
the
they're
buttons
using. Yep.
look like?
Yep. And so you're going to want to find then all the different ways that you might respond towards those stimulus conditions. So that's the 3rd and 4th one. So you have your stimulus variations that we talked about, and then your response variations that you're going to need to outline out. So this is all pre-thought. Right? You haven't started training anything. You haven't even brought this to the floor yet. You're just thinking about all the different ways you need to teach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got that initially either. You're right.
Right. Mhm.
It's harder to
Right,
think
yeah.
about that
Well,
way.
in the study too, I think a weakness of the article itself is they discuss those steps, and then they sort of leave it as, if you want to know how we answer these questions for vending machines, like write us a letter, and we'll send that to you, as opposed to just, I would have loved a table where they just sort of broke down,
Right.
Here were the types of vending machines, here were the components. So when I asked my question, let's define the discriminative stimulus that is going to control each response. Here are the ones I thought of. It was, they saw this, or someone said this, or this flashing light was at whatever it was across the vending machines. And not having that leaves the reader needing to sort of plan it out themselves. And now you also get to go back in time and think about, what if vending machines even look like in 1984?
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, if you could just wait 9 short years, the 1993 article does that.
I know, but still, it would have been. I wanted to see. I honestly was curious about what the different vending machine types
Me
they were
too.
using.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see it,
I would
but
too.
I think without that list, it does sort of make it harder to conceptualize
Yeah.
what they're talking about. And it sort of seems like, oh, okay, and then they did that as part of their.
Yeah.
That's a missing
Agreed.
step.
And their 5th guideline is just select examples that sample all of the stimulus and response variations, the entire instructional universe, basically.
No problem.
No,
So
no
easy.
No problem.
Yeah.
So again, there were 6 students in this study with moderate to severe intellectual disabilities, and all had a community competence IEP objective or a vending machine use IEP objective. So that's nice. None of them had used a vending machine before. And I love where they conducted them. So they conducted the training in probe locations in hallways, high school hallways, community recreational facilities, a hospital.
Bowling alleys.
I know.
Mhm.
Very scary bowling alleys, hospital lobbies, the laundromat, a lunchroom at a nearby place. So anywhere that high school students.
Oh, maybe they're
may be
those
found.
sandwich vending machines where you have to you buy the sandwich and you got to open the door and it's got the food in there.
Oh, it'll have like hard-boiled eggs in it.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
they had those then?
No.
They do now.
You get a pizza in a vending machine now.
Wow, what a world we live in.
Whoa. So the authors recommended that the students had to, when they see a vending machine, get the card, the appropriate card, to help them buy the materials with the logo of the item that they wanted to purchase and the coin spots. And then they needed to select the correct number of quarters, insert the quarters, activate the machine, obtain the item, and check for change. So that's what they needed to do.
And they didn't use dollars. They didn't have to worry
Nope.
about what if your
Nope.
dollar's too wrinkly, and
Nope,
then you got to
just
rub it against the
Oh.
Which is kind
corner
of nice.
of the vending machine
Yeah,
to
just
straighten
pick
it
the
out
quarters.
because that's
Just
a whole
go
other repertoire.
quarters. And they measured trials to criterion during training and correct performance on non-training probe machines during the probe trials. So during baseline, they did a single probe across all 10 machines and just saw how students did in using vending machine. And then they did a pretty interesting variation of the multiple baseline design where they staggered either a single instance to multiple instance to a general case analysis. So the single instance is where they just use one machine as the sole training example. And
Soul training.
Soul training. They did 3 to 15 trials for around 30 minutes, 4 or 5 times per week. The prompts that they used were modeling, verbal, and physical. And they don't really tell us what they did about that, but they just said that they met training criteria when all of those prompts were faded.
Yeah.
And then the multiple instance was the exact same as a single instance, except students were trained simultaneously with 3 machines that were similar to each other. So there's 3 different machines, right? So we're trying to get those multiple exemplars in there. But they were very similar, so they didn't encompass the entire instructional universe.
Yeah. But they picked the machines so that they didn't have that.
Right.
The sampling variation.
Yeah. And then with the general case analysis, they used this general case phase where the set of rules for selecting the training machines that they sampled all of the stimulus and response variations with the inclusion of the single case instance machine, that single instance that they taught, that uncovered everything that they could possibly find with these machines across all 10.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome.
I sort of imagine it like when we talked about matrix training, the idea of like, here are the different components of a vending machine. And when we train across the diagonal of vending machines with these 4 machines, we get them all. We capture everything.
You're not wrong.
No, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think it's.
I feel like I would have to draw that matrix out
You could map this on.
to really understand how the vending machines differed.
So the one thing that I want to note is that the single instance always preceded the general case.
Yep.
And the multiple instance always preceded the general case as well. So that could be a significant limitation, but who knows? But when they looked at the non-trained probe machines, you saw that across the 3 students that had baseline, everybody got 0 during baseline. Everybody got 0 instances.
So they had an IP objective about using vending machines, and luckily they didn't already know how to use vending machines.
But when you look at probe trials during single instances, it's fairly low. It's not even up to 50% of the steps completed. It's like around 10 to 20 with that single instance. So this is just a different machine. So it's not one that's even similar to the single instance.
It's one of their probe machines.
Yep, it's one of the probe machines, but it's different in stimulus and response variation. And then with the general case analysis, when you look at the non-trained probe machines, is really high. So all the students, for the most part, with the exception of subject 3, who didn't do great his first one, but then did really great.
Then he got it.
He's like, oh yeah. All were scoring like much higher than at all other levels.
And then multiple instance was not much better than single instance.
Nope, it wasn't much. And only 3 of the participants contacted the multiple instance teaching, and you didn't really see much of a difference. If that little line was there that was denoting the phase change line, I wouldn't have even imagined that something was different.
Yeah. So really the only way you saw any sort of generalization of the vending machine response was when you used the general case analysis.
Yeah, to those non-trained machines.
Those exemplars. And also, I think it's important to note during the probes, the participants got to buy the items, but they didn't get to eat the item.
I know.
So, but again, makes sense, because if they were able to eat the item, they might have learned just by getting the item. Although then, realistically, if you sort of stumbled upon a vending machine and somehow got it to work and then got the item, you might be able to learn through that, but not the point of the study.
In every other scenario,
Yes.
it would be fine. It's just here you have to try to maintain experimental control. Also, I think non-trained probe machines might be my new band name.
Yeah, that's true. One thing to note, though, too, is that across all students, there was more trials to criterion in the general case analysis than there was in the single instance, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? But then you also see more effects, more durable effects when you see those non-trained conditions. So it's not like, it's always better, right? Like if you need to train something very quickly and you don't really care about what's happening, I don't see when that would happen, but you never know.
Like someone started a new job. They just need to know this cash register.
Right?
Yeah.
It may be, you may not need to use a general case analysis for that, but if you are looking for students to respond to cross-trained and non-trained conditions, then the general case analysis will be really effective.
But the trial star criterion was about the same for the general case analysis as it was for the multiple instance.
Right.
And the big difference between those was, well, the multiple instance, you spent all that time, and then they really didn't generalize the skill across very many vending
Skill
machines.
wasn't generalized.
The skill was not
Skill wasn't
generalized.
right.
Excuse me.
We're working on it. And one thing I love is they added the cost in. So the total cost was $150, but if the items had not been resold, because I guess
they sold them back to the vending machine,
the probes,
store
I
or
bet.
whatever,
Yeah.
It was $255, so an average of $42.50 per student, which was fair.
Who knows? I mean, I
Who
don't know
knows?
how to translate that into today's money.
I don't
$1
either.
million.
It's probably
$1 million.
almost $1 million that
Well,
they
I
spent.
think if you work in a high school that has a vocational program, you often are able to. One of the jobs I often see is restocking vending machines because it is a needed job and it's a good way to practice a lot of different skills. So you're probably able to open up the machine and let's put these. Well, actually, maybe you can't put the sodas or the items back for health reasons. But if you're just buying them and they come out and you're sticking them in, it's not any different. I don't know.
There are probably ways to
There are ways
make this work out where you don't need to spend that much money.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
You
maybe
can also buy really cute little tabletop vending machines. Have you guys ever seen those?
No.
They just hold like 9 items.
Mhm.
It would be an awesome reinforcer if you could get one for your students. What's more fun than a vending machine? Nothing.
for
Absolutely
you.
nothing.
For you.
For anyone. I mean, come on, guys. No one's in agreement with me on this?
I mean, yeah, that would be cool. How much does it cost?
I don't know.
Christmas is coming
Okay.
next year.
Well,
Christmas is coming next year.
so this is, I think, a great example.
Guys, only 51 weeks till Christmas.
A great example of
Tiny
taking
vending machine.
taking those rules of the general case analysis and applying them. Let's travel into the future and move away from the relatively straightforward, I think, world of vending machines to the more complex world of language.
I'm so glad they did this, though. I'm like so glad because I love, when I was reading this, I just was so struck by how it's important that we are looking to program for spontaneity and generalization in language, because that's one of the main criticisms of behavior analysis as a field, right? Is that we're promoting robots and really rote language and rote responding. Doing research like this, I think, really helps expand our repertoire
Exactly.
as clinicians.
I might have dreamed it.
All right, so you're making up products that exist. How about instead of
No, I've seen it before.
Instead of inventing new vending machines, Diana, why don't we talk about general case analysis as
Here it
regards
is.
to language? Okay.
Tabletop,
No, please.
table countertop,
Great.
mechanical snack machine. It's
Excellent.
$195. It's used. It's on eBay.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Maybe you want to get back on track here with the research article that
Just having a good time thinking about vending machines.
we got to move on though. We can't just talk about vending machines. The podcasting world, there are lots of SDs, there are a lot of response variation. The vending machine one, that was a good one, but
It's over.
we have to switch it up. We can't just talk about vending machines. Otherwise, we have not trained ourselves as podcasters.
To talk about general case analysis
That's
in
right.
the whole instructional universe.
I have to say lots of different phrases. I want to have lots of intraverbal phrases so that you have response generalization.
Oh, fine. Okay, well, Jackie's point about spontaneity and generalization in language was really important. And the quote that Rob and I both wanted to share from this
Oh
article.
my god, I hope it's the one I wanted to.
I'm sure it is. It's really good. So it says, without spontaneous and generalized language, individuals with severe disabilities may be relegated to a life of passivity controlled by others, seriously diminishing their quality of life.
I had that too.
Yeah, I put a little asterisk
Yeah.
and said, "Good point."
I
A good
actually
quote.
wrote it in my notes.
Yeah, it's a super good quote, and it's also true.
Mhm.
Because you can be taught one thing or one phrase, and it's going to work in some settings, but it may only work with people who know that that's the phrase that you need to use, right? Or only for certain things that you've been trained to say it in regards to. And if you're out there in the big wide world, things aren't always as they were trained. Things vary every moment of every scenario, right? So being able to modify based on the conditions that are present and produce spontaneous and generative language is incredibly important in order to access the reinforcers that you need.
Yeah, the authors put it so beautifully when they said, An increase in spontaneity is about learning about increasing complex discriminations for controlling relations and reorganizing response classes on the basis of newly learned information and contingencies. Always learning.
So great.
It's definitely a nice conceptualization of language as this constantly evolving process where you're taking in different stimuli and you're responding in different ways, and then you're combining, well, these are the stimuli I've seen, I've responded to before, but they've taken 2 or 3 of those and they put them together, and now I need to respond to it is fun to think about language as that, rather than like let me dig into the mind file, let me go back, WH questions, I only got two files here, I'll send them by mail to my tongue where the sound will come out.
No,
That's
but
how it works,
I love
right?
this. Yeah, I love this like thought process, or how we're thinking about language in that way, because that's what it is. It's about recombining previously learned small units of behavior in different and new ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because language is behavior, just like other behavior is. So, the Sprague and Horner example is so wonderful because it's so concrete. It's like, we're going to teach vending machine use, but we're going to teach it related to all the different varieties of vending machines. These authors took it a step further as far as conceptualization of the general case analysis and said, we're going to analyze the general case related to how do we request for help. And we're going to look to see what are all the varying stimuli and responses that need to occur in order to ask for help in varied settings.
I love that.
Which is really cool.
They're like, challenge accepted.
Yeah, and they did a bang-up job of
did.
this, I must say. This was a really good article.
They thought of everything. I love when the article, they're like, we're talking about requesting to help. We know that they need help, but we don't know if they want it.
I know.
I love that. I was like, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So
which they didn't have an answer for, but they brought it up as a limitation, which was really cool.
Oh, I loved that.
Yeah, this is a really, really good article. So they talk a little bit about what the general case analysis is, and I think that we've largely covered that, right? But it's looking at the varying stimulus and response classes with regard to a particular type of responding. And the second piece of that, going beyond the initial analysis, is the general case instruction. Mm-hmm. So that's where we get into the teaching side of things. So what they're looking to do here is teach when and when not to respond under a variety of stimulus conditions with regard to this particular response. So the purpose of their study was to use the general case instruction to teach spontaneous and generalized requests for assistance for 3 young women, all who had a variety of fairly significant intellectual disabilities. So there were 3 teenagers involved in the study. Helen, who was 19, she was diagnosed with intellectual disability. She was verbal, and they approximated about 40 words that she used regularly. Sally was 15. She had severe to profound intellectual disability. She used sign as her primary mode of communication, had about 15 to 20 that she used regularly. And then Tess was 17. The diagnosis they provided for her was cerebral palsy, although it seemed as though she most likely had intellectual disabilities as well, in that she did not seem to respond independently to much and had approximately 10 signs in her repertoire but needed prompting to use those. So those were the participants who needed to learn how to request assistance across a whole variety of settings. So, of course, they can and did use several different settings for the study. They did some training in the classroom, the hallway, the cafeteria, the Voc site, an apartment site, and the mall. And then they also had other settings in which they did probes with different people, too. And those were even other situations like the parking lot and other spots. So basically everywhere you could think of.
Different water fountains. I like that.
Different water fountains. So the first thing they did was the analysis part here. They developed this really nice general case analysis form, which was intended to kind of like break apart the instructional universe to figure out what are the appropriate stimuli and responses that need to be accounted for.
That's what you wanted. That's what you wanted, Robin.
I did, and I was very excited to see it, especially for something that is much more complicated like language.
It was beautiful. It's on page 180.
And it does the thing I love very much when I'm reading a journal article, especially if it's late at night, and I get to a page and it's like, it's a giant table. I can just come back to this later, and that's one less page. I read a page in a second.
Yeah. It's amazing.
I'll review this when I feel like it,
Did your eyes turn into green lasers and you just scanned down the page?
I just kind of went, just
and then you just stuck it in the mind file.
Right in my mind
later.
file. Mm-hmm. My little homunculus.
So table 1 is what they call the general case analysis form, and they did a really beautiful job. So the activity was requesting help, and they broke that down into the general category of a response that would need to occur, which included recognize the need for help, gain the listener's attention, and then ask for help. And then within each of those responses, they recognized the general stimuli that would be present in that scenario. So for recognizing help, there would be some type of barrier to accessing food, mobility, doors, and water fountains. That was specifically how they were defining help here. To gain the listener's attention, there should be a listener present, right? That's the stimulus. And then to ask for help, the listener needs to be making eye contact. So those were all established. And then they broke down what are all the stimulus variants for each of those things, right? So the variants of the barriers could be that there's different types of doors and they're heavy or they're opaque or they're clear. There's different types of water fountains that might have a push button or a sidebar or the tiny little one on the top that you have to push with your thumb. Food packaging. There's like a million different variations there.
Stairs without handrails.
Stairs without handrails, yeah. So they broke down all of those things that they could think of, even as far as the listeners. So there are different types of listeners that we need to ensure that responding could occur to all of them. So
And
are
they
they
were-
male or female? And what color hair do they have?
It was amazing. They were like, and then we have 3 Asians and 1 white person, and like
Right.
they were very specific.
Yes, in 1993 language. They were very
Yes.
specific, which might be updated today.
Yes, absolutely.
Then they recognized that there were different response variations as well, right? So what could requesting help look like? There might be different ways that they're going to demonstrate the need for help, right? So maybe they're like shaking the container. They are going to turn toward the listener rather than gaining their attention, but not be close enough, right? So like all those types of things, they built those into. And then they also talked about exceptions to the problem that could be encountered or potential errors. So an automatic door, they didn't account for that, right? That's a whole different thing. They're either going to teach or not teach, depending. So they did a really good job of breaking down the instructional universe to figure out what needs to be taught. Then, in Table 2, they gave us training examples and probe examples because the setup of the study is very much like the Sprague and Horner one, right? They trained single instance, then they trained the general case instruction, and periodically throughout, they did probes. Is basically the arrangement that we had here. So
Right. As soon as one participant had acquired a skill, they did probes for
yeah,
everybody.
they did.
I like that. They're like, you've got it. Now, does everybody got it?
I like that too. I wrote
Yeah.
that down. That it's like the take a shot game.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Every time someone's mastered something, do a probe. So they broke down what was going to happen in the single instance training in this little table here by their 4 categories. So accessing food, operating the water fountain, needing help with some type of mobility thing, or opening a door. And in the single instance training, they only did the accessing food.
Which I love because if I'm reading it, that didn't quite like hit home hard. But when
Sure.
I looked at Table 2, I'm like, oh, the rest of them are blank. Duh, because I didn't
Yeah.
train them. I loved that.
Yeah, it was really helpful tables.
Yeah. It's a good place. It's a good time to use a table here.
Yes, exactly. Then they told us what they did in the general case training, so exactly what those scenarios look like. Stairs without handrails, glass push door, push button water fountain, etc. And then they told us what they used for the probe items. And there was another super awesome bonus that they included here as well, which was they had one of their probe conditions was something that they never included in training, and it was fastening your coat. It's beautiful, guys.
I love that.
Right?
It's completely
Remembering
non-trained.
to include something like that is just the mark of a good paper.
Mhm.
Because
Mark of a good thought process when
Yes.
you're designing your experiment, because that's not something you can put in at the end.
nope, you had to remember at the beginning
Yep.
that you wanted to include a condition that was unlike all the other conditions to see if you had ultimate generalization. And they remembered. So the dependent variables here were trials to criterion as far as teaching the individuals to request help, which was either verbal or through sign, depending on the participant. And the second dependent variable was their correct performance during the probes. They made sure to include a variety of interventionists, like I said, which was another just really nice touch, and it was a multiple probe design. So they started things off with a probe, which was just a naturally occurring opportunity to request help. Then they taught everyone the single instance instruction first, which again was a limitation, just like Sprague and Horner, right? So everyone had already been exposed to the single instance training.
But nobody really did it greatly.
No.
Only Sally did a little bit better. She was around 60 or 70%. But everybody else didn't do great.
Yeah, Helen and Tess did not. But that's just something that they brought up again. And then following that, then they went on to do the general case training. Now, they did do probes throughout, so we had the opportunity to see whether progress was occurring. And then in the single instance training, they had 5 opportunities per day and used least to most prompting to produce the help response.
I do like that they gave them 5 seconds before helping them. So they gave that criteria, wait 5 seconds, and then you can provide the prompt or terminate the sessions of a probe session. I like that.
Yeah, they did. They gave more detail than I gave.
No, but that's nice. I like that.
This was a pretty technologically sound article.
Oh, absolutely.
And they also did something called overtraining, which I actually didn't know much about.
Me neither.
Yeah, I don't know if that's... This whole concept, I feel like, has kind of fallen out of favor. But overtraining was not part of the general case. It was part of the single case instruction.
Right.
And once they met criteria, they went back and had them meet mastery criteria again.
Yeah,
a second time.
When I read that, I wasn't quite sure what they'd done. They just presented the task again right after. Yeah, it was odd. At first, I thought they used it as a form of an overcorrection. That, they did it,
though.
And then they made them do it again. But it almost felt like they sort of ignored the fact that, or they'd met the mastery criteria.
They're
and
just
said, let's do it again.
Extra sure on the mastery. Yeah. So it only added about 4 or 5 sessions to ensure that they had it again. But it was just worth mentioning that I didn't think I knew that much about overtraining, but that was a component that they included here.
Because Sprague and Horner also used it, but they didn't really talk about it a ton in that study.
No, and here either, there was just one sentence. Yeah. You needed overtraining. Okay, anyway. And then following that, they moved on to the general case training, in which they presented a variety of stimulus conditions across all those categories we just talked about. And again, they provided the same type of prompting. So looking at the results, like Jackie said, Sally had the highest level of performance during the initial baseline. She did request help in some scenarios there, but only around 50%. So it was not to the level that we were looking for. And then Helen and Tess both had low levels of responding in baseline. And during the single instance training, everyone's performance improved to some degree, but the highest was Sally, which was around 60 to 70%. So she did make some progress there in the train scenarios, but not in necessarily other scenarios. Helen's performance remained low, and Tess's performance was moderate at around 40 to 50%. Then they moved on to the general case training. For Sally and Tess, this was highly effective. So their performance increased to 90% or better across everything. And then they maintained, thank you. And then they maintained those skills too. They did pretty long maintenance follow-up for this study, which was great. This
32 out of 36 specific skills for Sally were maintained, and 17 out of 18 skills were maintained for Tess, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty good. For Helen, they needed to make several modifications for this for her, and her performance was pretty variable throughout. So she made some increases in requesting help during the general case training scenario, but she never got above about 60%. And again, it was pretty variable.
And one thing they noted too was that this was the first participant they used randomly, and they actually moved on before they saw clinically acceptable levels for Helen during the general case training because she was so low. And so they didn't want to leave everyone else in baseline for thousands of years because they were already doing overtraining. So Helen was the only one that did not experience overtraining because of the long time that she was in her sessions. It took her to require skills.
And they had several ideas as to why this seemed to be more difficult for Helen. She was also engaging in other types of challenging behavior during the sessions, and they really weren't sure about the motivational component for her, whether she was really looking to get help.
And she probably was trying to escape. Right?
Yeah, she's like, I'm all done here.
You're not going on these stairs. I don't want to go out this door.
Right. So we don't fully know what was happening there. And I think we probably can all think about students that we've worked with for whom general case training may be more complex, and we may not see the performance gains that we would want to. Whereas if you just trained one single scenario first, you might see progress there. before moving on to the really more complex conditional discriminations that are often required in general case training. So it may be that that was the case for Helen. We don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
But for 2 out of 3 participants, general case training worked really well. They saw really nice gains in performance only when they added in the general case training. Now, it was always preceded by single case. So there's that factor, but it really was effective for Sally and Tess in this study.
I found that the key points there, that analysis of stimulus variation is likely more important than that of the response variation. Because that was like the key discussion point that I got, that if you don't know all the variations that your student will encounter, it's going to be harder for you to think about the responses that they'll need. Mm-hmm. So when they're talking about like some of the things that they were thinking about when developing their general case analysis guidelines, that was like their take-home point, I felt, was that you should look there first. Like, think of all the things that you're going to need to see, and then think about the responses.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you actually have to experience.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You can't just think about them.
Yeah,
you have to,
I think so, too. You have to go to all the machines and write it down.
Go to the hand dryers. Experience the hand dryers.
Experience the fountain. Try to get through that door. How are you going to get through it? How are the many ways? Because there actually are many ways you can get through a door.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So I think that brings us, since we've had a chance to talk about our articles for the episode, let's move into our dissemination station. This train is...
God.
let's just put this train out of its misery. Oh, jeez. Louise, that's not good. So unlike, I think, some of the topics we go over, where there's either some debate about, which of these articles is correct, or which procedure is the best, or how does this completely change your practice, I think for a number of practitioners, there's nothing in here that sounds like, I don't know if I want to do that. I think everyone's probably listening going, yes, oh my goodness, I love this. I should be using this all the time. But like we discussed, there is a level of complexity that goes into the planning that many of us probably are not very fluent in, and is going to change dependent on what the actual skill is. So I thought, rather than doing kind of like, let's just re-review the articles really quickly, let's do a brief. It's not going to be thorough because we're in the recording studio. We're not going to be out in the community. But a brief general case analysis with some common ideas around a skill that we are often asked to train, or we work with individuals to train. Just sort of a mental exercise, and to sort of get people thinking about what the process might look like. So I think we talked about a couple skills beforehand. Surprise, I didn't just drop this on everybody. And I like the idea of talking about hand washing, because it's a skill that everyone needs to work on, especially if you're listening to this, around the time this is being released.
And I'm just coughing
And it's
everywhere.
flu season,
It's
guys.
flu
so
season.
Wash
So
your
you want to
hands.
wash
everyone.
your hands.
I don't have flu, I just have a sinus infection.
Thanks.
So when we are looking at our general case analysis, we need to think of, let's go over, what are the pieces that we want to be thinking of in our planning?
What I want to train.
What are the stimuli and the response variants that we need to know? Related to the instructional universe of hand washing.
Okay.
Right. So where is the student going to be washing their hands? At home, at school, at their job, at the mall. Like, think of all the different places where they would be washing their hands.
Yep.
Restaurant. Right.
How will the response demands change across the different settings and the different types?
Yes.
Yep. When they're going to wash their hands, when they're not going to wash their hands.
Should always wash your hands.
Yeah, that's true. But
there are common times that you would wash your hands. Like, you usually wouldn't wash your hands in the middle of a meal. You'd wash your hands before the meal, possibly after the meal.
Right.
unless you're a
Like
small
my 3-year-old.
child. Right.
Goes in the bathroom and he like holds his hands like out at his sides, like he's like a tutu wearing ballerina. And then he finishes and he says, "I don't need to wash my hands," because he didn't touch anything. I'm like, oh no. If you came in the bathroom, you have to wash your hands before you leave. I don't think that was your point though.
No.
So it's much more complex than you really think to wash your hands, because just think about the number of different types of faucets. Like just trying to turn the water on, right? You can have one where it's just the one up and down, like handle looking faucet. But then if you turn it to the right, it's cold. If you turn it to the left, it's hot. If you turn it too far left, it's too hot.
It's really hot. Or if you turn it too far right, it's too cold. Nobody loves that in the winter.
Nope, that's no good. Or you can have the ball. It's just a ball, but you move the ball up and down.
I hate that
That
ball.
is, there's only one.
And then twist it. You have to twist the ball.
Or you have to turn it.
cold and
Exactly.
Or the automatic.
You got an automatic or you stick your
That
hands
one
under
is
it?
just like, no one can do those because you stick your hand under and it doesn't work. And you got to move your hand up and down and around and take it out and put it back in. Or you can have two faucets, one that operates the cold and one that operates the hot. And you need to know how to turn those both on or only one or mix them to the proper temperature.
You got the push button on the timer. You have to push it in.
Those are really hard.
Those are very difficult. I mean, I think you've got the different sink designs too. So you've certainly got the sinks where it's just your standard sort of a bowl sink. You've got sinks that are low, that are high, that are sort of a trough design. You've got the sinks with the crazy faucets that look like a fancy waterfall that are beautiful, but man, are they a pain to wash your hands with.
Yeah. So all of that.
That's just to get your hands wet. And you got to get soap on your hands. And you got your different soap dispensers. You got
have
your
the
pump
wall soap,
dispenser,
the
the
pump
wall
soap.
one.
The automatic soap.
Is it built in? You need the two hands because you got reach over. Is it in the front? Is it in the
You have to
back
stabilize
of the sink?
this pump soap with the other hand. Is it good at bar soap?
Yeah.
Those still exist in some places.
Shoot.
I remember
They
the
do.
first time one of our kids saw a bar of soap next to his sink, and he turned to me and said, "How do I wash my hands with this?"
Right.
Because he had never seen it before.
There's no liquid.
Because nobody does. I mean,
Yeah.
most people don't have bar soap. They do the liquid pump soaps.
So there's all those variations. And then you have to actually go through the steps of washing your hands, which is relatively static, unless they're particularly dirty. You got to make those changes. And then you have to dry your hands.
Paper
So
towel,
long.
How do you get the
there.
paper towel out of the dispenser?
Hand
There's like
towel.
6 ways to do that.
crank, twist,
Right.
pull the corners.
You got to pull it with 2 hands.
You got your push the button, and then you get the weak air. You've got the powerful air. You've got those Dyson ones where you actually completely unrelated to pushing a button, holding your hands. You got to jam your hands in and pull
Right.
them out.
Yes. Although they say that those just spread germs everywhere.
All of those, all of
nasty.
those hand dryers have germs all over the place. They're not actually that healthy to use.
Gross. Right. So we just described about 35 different variations. Or if you combine them all together, it's like so
Yeah.
many.
Yeah. So this is definitely one where you would want to say, what is this? Let's narrow down the instructional universe a bit. What are the faucets and soap situations at home, in a place of employment, and in commonly attended locations? You probably want to start there and narrow it a little bit.
Yeah,
and
maybe
then train
like your
across
three
those settings.
favorite places, right?
Like, where do you go? Because again, I think most like grocery stores or most stores in general, I think, are going to have the laser faucet where you stick your hand underneath. Some of them are going to have the auto pump soaps. Some of them are going to have the pump soaps. So those might be sort of two of the stimulus variations you look at. Most places have paper towels still, but you probably want to get at least one hand dryer. There are many types of hand dryers, but most of them you stick your hands underneath. Some of them don't even have the button anymore.
My favorite hand dryer are the hand dryers that are towels that you just pull down and use them and they just keep going.
Oh, I hate those.
I love those.
I hate the ones that no matter what, when you pull it out, it just
They're
keeps
always
shooting them
wet.
out, and then it touches, and then the paper towel goes and it touches the big
trash.
pile of wet trash underneath, and you're like, I don't want to use that paper towel.
Yeah.
So you sort of narrow down your instructional universe, and then you'd combine sort of the most common types to train across. So you'd say, okay, I think, something with lasers, is going to be one at the
Lasers.
top. Something with the pump, whether it's the water or the soap itself. And then, you got paper towels maybe, and then a hand dryer exemplar might be your two. And then you just sort of train across those 3 common types, and then you say, okay, it's a little bit different at this grocery store versus this grocery store, but it's a grocery store you might go to. Sometimes you go to Target, sometimes you go to the Trader Joe's. I don't think they have bathrooms at Trader Joe's. Oh, no, they do have bathrooms at Trader Joe's.
Yeah, they do. I've used them a lot of times.
They're very tropical.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then there you go. You train at the Trader Joe's, you train at home, you train at one of the school bathrooms, and then those are the places where you're trying to capture all those different responses, all the different stimuli, and then you do your sort of train and hope, but it wouldn't be train and hope because you trained and planned. And if you didn't
Trained and planned.
you trained and planned.
Train and plan.
All right, and that's really it. It's mostly the sitting and thinking through.
Yeah, it's the front loading part.
Mhm.
I think it's the
And not
hardest.
just assuming like, oh, we taught them to wash their hands at school and they're done. And I'm sure they can wash their hands anywhere now.
They can't.
That's probably
Yeah.
not the case.
Mhm.
There's so many variants, which we just described.
Mhm.
Another one I think is a good thing to think about is all the different types of ways that you can pay for something.
Oh, yes. Were you there? We saw a talk. I think we saw someone do a talk on different payment
Yes,
systems.
and I was going to bring up Sharon Reeve as well, because while no one is calling this stuff general case analysis necessarily right now, that's absolutely what Sharon Reeve is working on.
Which
so
credit
she's doing
card?
so much
It's
great
the
work
swipe,
on generalization.
It's the insert. What button do you press? Is the green button the go or the go back or the delete? Yeah.
Yes, all of those options.
That blew my mind when she started reviewing the different types of payment options. I was like, there's like three variations. Oh no. Oh no. That's 47 when you sort of look at all the different areas just in the common stores that an individual might want to go to.
I always like to think of using a microwave.
That's a good one too.
Because microwaves all look different. There's like the turn.
You have to put the power button first.
Right. Is it timer? Yeah,
Oh yeah, the ones with the knob.
The knobs.
Oh god.
The knobs are the worst. Or do you have to hit that like power up button first? Or you just put the numbers
put a
in
1.
first, or the 1 or the 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the combination
So many
of buttons you
options.
need to press?
Right.
Yeah.
So the general case analysis is actually very useful.
Yeah.
Across lots of things.
I've been thinking about labeling emotions.
Oh yeah.
Because you can't just have one card for happy, one card for sad, and one card for mad, and teach those and be like, and we've learned emotions.
Right.
No, not at all.
Mm-mm.
There's so many other things you need to think about.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
Since, of course, we can't go through every single exemplar for every single skill, I think what might be fun, and, maybe our listeners will or will not agree, I think it would be great if we have listeners out there who hear about general case analysis and say, you know what? I want to do some general case analysis planning. I would love to hear their thoughts. If anyone out there, and if you're listening and you say, you know what, this inspires me, or I've recently done a general case analysis, we'd love to hear you. We'd love to kind of hear your thoughts and sort of what were the response variance and the stimulus variance that you took into account and planned. Now, that won't be necessarily an exhaustive list that everyone can then use because, again, the variance in your area or not the variance than in someone else's area, but I think it would be kind of a good way to give people more, exemplars about what general case analysis looks like. If you're interested in sharing those, well, then we'd love to see that. And there's lots of different ways you can share with us. Now it's time we get...
How?
Oh, would you like to know?
How?
Well, now that we're at the end of the show and everyone has been such great listeners, and I want to thank them all so much for listening, what if you'd like to share that? Well, you certainly can find ABA Inside Track online, everywhere on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can go to our website, abainsidetrack.com. You can find us on YouTube. The podcast itself is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcast. We'd love it if you subscribe and like and all that stuff. Or you can just email us your general case analysis thoughts at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. Oh, and also, if you've listened and enjoyed this and are in the need of continuing education units, well, you can also go to our website and click on the Get CEUs button, but you're going to need a second secret code word, and I suppose now would be a good time to give that to you. And that code word is Turkey. Turkey.
Something you eat.
Like the bird. Have you seen the turkeys, the wild turkeys that wander around the center of town yet, Jackie?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I absolutely have.
They are obnoxious. Turkey.
I like them.
Oh,
They're
do you?
supposed to be the country's bird.
Oh, yes, America's country.
America. Country of America.
I thought you were referring to Turkey, like they were going to
if
make
Benjamin
Turkey the
Franklin had his way.
bird. No.
But they are too ugly.
They're too ugly. Turkey. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much, Jackie and Diana, for being here and talking about general case analysis. And thank you so much, listeners, for listening to us talk about general case analysis. We'll be back next week with another exciting topic. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.